I'm Terry Deary, best known as the author of Horrible Histories, and welcome to the Glorious Georgians. I mean, history is horrible. For a start, everybody in history is dead, and some people are very dead indeed. Of course, history teachers don't tell you this, oh no. They drone on about boring battles and dusty dates and other foul facts. What you really want to know is the interesting stuff. How did people live and how did they die? George Frederick Handel arrived in England in 1711, at the end of the slimy Stuart's reign. We're going to hear about what life was like for George Handel in Georgian London, from what the filthy rich got up to how the poor managed to survive. We'll also find out more about what Handel was like. What did he enjoy eating for his dinner? Why did he wear a big wig? And how he managed to write such brilliant music. It made him #1 in the Georgian charts. Rinaldo was his first great success, named after a famous footballer. No, only joking. It was the first Italian opera especially composed for London in 1711, and it was a sensational success. Audiences in London had seen nothing of this sort before this opera. It was a great spectacle with remarkable stagecraft, a real statement from Handel. He was here to stay. However, one of the journalists at the time remarked about how a flock of sparrows was released into the theatre as an effect in certain scenes. There have been so many flights let loose in this opera that it's feared the house will never get rid of them, and that in other plays they may make their entrance in very wrong and improper scenes, besides the inconveniences which the heads of the audience may sometimes suffer from them. I hope we don't have any in here today. One of Handel's first divas sang the piece you've just heard, and some of the singers he used for the operas had very big heads. One story goes that two of the top divas tore into each other on stage and ripped off each other's wigs. Even more entertainment for the audience, I suppose. Another story goes that one refused to sing one of Handel's arias because it had been written for another singer. Handel apparently picked her up and threatened to throw her out of the window. Imagine if your teacher did that because you refused to do your homework, eh? The Georgian era was the great age of theatre. Handel brought the extravagance of Europe to London with his Italian operas, and they were a great success. However, the tastes of the audiences soon changed, and interest in Italian opera faded away. After all, hardly any of them actually understood the Italian language. So they needed something in English to understand the words. Handel moved with the times because if he didn't, he wouldn't have enough money to pay for his servants and his extravagant lifestyle. So he created his next venture, oratorio. Oratorio was basically religious opera, but didn't involve acting or dancing about. One oratorio he wrote became his most famous work ever, Messiah. system. The writer, Daniel Defoe, went on tour of Britain and described the country. He thought Manchester was the greatest village in the land. So he'd be pleased to know the village football team are now doing quite well. He wrote that Liverpool was one of the wonders of Britain. And this was 200 years before the Beatles. He also saw some pretty dreadful sights, especially among the poor people. The old ways were changing. And as usual, it meant the poor got poorer and the rich got richer. Defoe reckoned there were 7 classes of people in Georgian Britain. Nothing's ever that simple, of course. Which one would you like to have been in? Class 7, the miserable, who really suffer want. Class 6, the poor, whose lives are hard. Class 5, the country people, who manage indifferently. Class 4, the working trades, who labour hard but feel no want. Class 3, the middle sort, who live well. Class 2, the rich, who live plentifully. And finally, Class 1, the greats, who live profusely. The Duke of Chandos was such a rich man who maintained an excellent musical establishment at his estate called Canons and employed an orchestra of up to 30 musicians. In 1717, the Duke of Chandos appointed Handel to work at Canons and compose music to be performed in a private setting. Imagine being able to have your own orchestra to play in your living room. In the summer of 1718, Handel's first work written in English got its first performance in the Duke's front room. This piece became one of the most popular works during his lifetime, Acis and Galatea. The semi-divine nymph, Galatea, is in love with a simple shepherd called Acis. She sings to the birds, "Hush, ye pretty warbling choir," just in case those birds from earlier haven't cleared off yet.